Deep in the Tanagar Canyon of Breath of the Wild lies a structure so massive, so hauntingly familiar, that thousands of players have walked through it without realizing what they're truly seeing. This isn't just another crumbling ruin in Hyrule. This is a monument that connects two of the most beloved games in Zelda history, and the story it tells, it rewrites everything fans thought they knew about Hyrule's timeline. The Forgotten Temple. The name alone sends chills down the spine of any longtime Zelda fan who's explored its shadowy corridors. Stretching nearly half a kilometer into the rocky canyon walls, this colossal structure dwarfs almost every other ruin in Breath of the Wild. But here's the question that's been burning in the Zelda community since the game's release in 2017. What if this temple isn't forgotten at all? What if it's the most important historical landmark in the entire game? Let's start with what players immediately notice when approaching this architectural marvel. The Forgotten Temple extends deep into the Tanagar Canyon, its entrance flanked by weathered stone pillars that have stood for millennia. The approach itself is treacherous. Guardian stalkers patrol the outer areas, as if still protecting something sacred within. And when players finally step inside, the scale is breathtaking. The temple's interior features a long, columned hall that stretches into darkness, with the ceiling partially collapsed, allowing shafts of light to pierce through. Nature has reclaimed much of the structure. Vines crawl up ancient stonework, and debris litters the floor. But the most striking feature? A massive goddess statue at the far end of the temple, her hands raised in blessing, weathered by time but still radiating an aura of divine purpose. Now here's where things get interesting. Players who've spent time with Ocarina of Time, the groundbreaking 1998 Nintendo 64 classic, might experience a powerful sense of déjà vu when exploring the Forgotten Temple. And that feeling? It's completely intentional. The architectural parallels between the Forgotten Temple and Ocarina of Time's Temple of Time are impossible to ignore once fans know what to look for. Both structures feature grand, elongated halls with columns lining either side. Both lead to a sacred chamber at their far end. Both are designed with specific ceremonial purposes in mind. The similarities aren't subtle. They're screaming at players who have eyes to see. In Ocarina of Time, the Temple of Time served as one of the most crucial locations in the entire game. This was where Link pulled the Master Sword from its pedestal, where he opened the Door of Time, where his journey truly began. The temple's interior featured those iconic blue-tinted stone columns, a long processional walkway, and at its heart, the chamber containing the Master Sword and the Door of Time. Players spent significant time in this location, and its design became etched into gaming history. Fast forward to Breath of the Wild, released nearly 2 decades later, the Forgotten Temple mirrors this layout with stunning precision. The long columned hall, the sacred chamber at the end, even the sense of approaching something deeply important, it's all there. But there's more, much more. The columns themselves tell a story. In the Forgotten Temple, players can count dozens of these massive stone pillars, many now broken or toppled, creating obstacles throughout the hall. The spacing, the proportions, the way they frame the path forward, all of it echoes the Temple of Time's design language. Nintendo's developers didn't just throw random ruins together. They crafted a deliberate architectural callback that rewards longtime fans while enriching the game's environmental storytelling. But architecture alone doesn't prove a connection, right? That's where geography enters the picture, and this is where the evidence becomes truly compelling. The Temple of Time in Ocarina of Time was located in the heart of Castletown, positioned as the spiritual center of Hyrule Kingdom. It stood as a guardian between the mundane world and the sacred realm, accessible to all but understood by few. Its location was no accident. This was the nexus point of Hyrule's spiritual and temporal power. In Breath of the Wild, the Forgotten Temple sits in the Tanagar Canyon region, north and slightly west of Hyrule Castle. Now, Hyrule's geography has undergone massive changes between games. The Great Calamity alone reshaped the landscape, not to mention the countless centuries that passed between different entries in the timeline. But here's the fascinating part. The Forgotten Temple's location, when examined carefully, suggests it could very well occupy the ancient site where Castletown once thrived. The canyon walls that now surround the temple, those could be the result of geological upheaval, erosion, and catastrophic events that buried the original settlement. The Hyrule of Breath of the Wild is explicitly stated to be thousands of years beyond any previous game, with multiple cycles of rise and fall having occurred. The land itself has been transformed, reshaped by both natural forces and the recurring battles between good and evil that define this legendary series. Players exploring the broader Hebra and Tabantha regions can find other ruins scattered throughout, remnants of ancient settlements, forgotten outposts, crumbling bridges that once connected thriving communities. The Forgotten Temple represents the grandest of these ruins, the one structure whose scale and significance warranted preservation by the Sheikah, even if its original purpose faded from memory. And speaking of the Sheikah, their involvement adds another layer to this mystery. The Guardian Stalkers patrolling the temple's entrance weren't placed there randomly. These ancient machines, created 10,000 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, were positioned at locations of strategic or spiritual importance. The fact that Guardians still patrol the Forgotten Temple suggests the Sheikah recognized its significance, even if the general population of Hyrule had lost that knowledge. Now let's dive into the real heart of this theory, the Master Sword connection. This is where everything comes together in a way that's both beautiful and haunting. In Ocarina of Time, the Master Sword rested in the Temple of Time, sealed within the pedestal of time behind the Door of Time. This wasn't just storage. The temple served as the sword's sanctuary, the sacred space where the blade of evil's bane awaited the chosen hero. The temple and the sword were intrinsically linked, two halves of the same legendary safeguard. In Breath of the Wild, the Master Sword rests in the Korok Forest, embedded in a pedestal within the Lost Woods. Link must prove his worth by having sufficient heart containers, a direct callback to the hero chosen by the sword concept. But here's the crucial detail that connects to the Forgotten Temple. The sword's placement in the Lost Woods is explicitly described as a protective measure, a way to hide and preserve the blade after previous calamities. What if the Forgotten Temple represents the original resting place of the Master Sword in this timeline? What if, before some ancient calamity forced its relocation to the Lost Woods, the sword was kept in what was still known as the Temple of Time? The temple's current state, overgrown, collapsed, forgotten, could represent what happened after the sword was moved, after its primary purpose was fulfilled, after it became simply another ruin in a kingdom that had fallen and risen countless times. The goddess statue at the far end of the temple reinforces this theory. Throughout the Zelda series, goddess statues are associated with divine power, with the sacred, with locations where the boundaries between mortal and divine grow thin. The statue in the Forgotten Temple isn't just decoration, it's a marker, a sign that this location once held tremendous spiritual significance. And what could be more spiritually significant than housing the Master Sword, the blade forged by the Goddess Hylia herself? There's even an environmental clue that many players miss. The way light filters into the Forgotten Temple through the collapsed sections of ceiling creates an almost cathedral-like atmosphere, with beams of sunlight illuminating specific areas. This lighting design mirrors religious architecture throughout human history, where light is used symbolically to represent divine presence. The developers at Nintendo carefully crafted these visual elements to evoke that sense of the sacred, of the holy, just as they did with the Temple of Time in Ocarina of Time. But let's address the skeptics for a moment. Some fans argue that these connections are just Easter eggs, fun references for longtime players without deeper meaning. And to them, the evidence says, look deeper. Nintendo's development team, led by visionaries like Hidemaru Fubayashi and Eiji Aonuma, have repeatedly emphasized their commitment to Zelda's interconnected lore. In interviews collected in books like Creating a Champion, the official behind-the-scenes tome for Breath of the Wild, the developers discuss their intentional placement of ruins and landmarks to suggest Hyrule's deep history. They specifically mention wanting players to feel the weight of time, to sense that this kingdom has endured for millennia. The Forgotten Temple isn't named casually. That name is a deliberate choice. It's forgotten by the current inhabitants of Hyrule, yes, but it's remembered by the architecture, by the land itself, by the very stones that comprise it. It's a temple that has forgotten itself, lost its original identity through the countless centuries, yet still stands as testament to what once was. Consider also the broader pattern of how Breath of the Wild handles legacy locations. The game is filled with references to previous Zelda titles, the ranch ruins hinting at Lon Lon Ranch from Ocarina of Time, the various geographical names echoing past games, the recurring motifs in Sheikah technology. Nintendo didn't scatter these references randomly, they wove them into a tapestry that suggests all Zelda games share a common history, with Breath of the Wild representing the distant culmination of those legendary tales. The Temple of Time connection specifically carries extra weight because of how central that location is to Zelda mythology. Along with Hyrule Castle and the Temple of the Goddess, the Temple of Time represents one of the franchise's most iconic landmarks. Having its ruined, forgotten form appear in Breath of the Wild creates a powerful thematic statement. Even the mightiest monuments to faith and heroism can fall to time, but their essence, their spirit, endures. There's something profoundly moving about walking through the Forgotten Temple with this knowledge. Every toppled column becomes a reminder of past glories. Every shaft of light breaking through the collapsed ceiling becomes a symbol of hope persisting through darkness. Every step down that long, columned hall echoes the footsteps of heroes past, of a young boy in a green tunic who once pulled a legendary sword from its pedestal, of the countless souls who sought refuge in sacred spaces during troubled times. And here's another detail that fans have uncovered through careful exploration: the temple's orientation. The Forgotten Temple is aligned along a specific axis, with its main hall running in a particular direction. While Hyrule's geography has changed dramatically, careful analysis of mountain ranges and waterways suggests that this alignment could match the original placement of structures in Castletown from Ocarina of Time. It's a subtle touch, but it's exactly the kind of meticulous world building that Nintendo's legendary Zelda team is known for. The materials used in the temple's construction also warrant attention. The stonework shows characteristics consistent with ancient Hylian architecture: smooth-cut blocks, precise joints, decorative elements that appear in other confirmed historical sites throughout Breath of the Wild. The Sheikah didn't build this temple. The Zonai didn't build this temple. This was Hylian craftsmanship from an era when the kingdom was at its peak, when master stonemasons created monuments meant to stand for eternity. Players who've completed the DLC expansion, the Champion's Ballad, encounter even more evidence of Breath of the Wild's commitment to interconnected lore. The expansion reveals additional backstory, shows more of Hyrule's cyclic history, and reinforces that this kingdom has risen and fallen multiple times. Each cycle leaves its marks on the landscape, its ruins, its legends. The Forgotten Temple fits perfectly into this pattern, a remnant from one of the earliest cycles, preserved through sheer structural integrity and divine significance. Let's talk about what this means for the Zelda timeline, that infamous, hotly debated chronology that Nintendo officially revealed in the Hyrule Historia book back in 2011. According to official sources, Breath of the Wild takes place so far in the future that it potentially converges multiple timeline branches. It's a Hyrule that has experienced everything: the Hero of Time's adventures, the Great Flood, the Twilight Invasion, all of it now ancient history. In this context, the Forgotten Temple becomes even more significant. It's not just a callback to one game, it's a monument that has survived across multiple timeline branches, multiple iterations of Hyrule Kingdom. Whether players follow the adult timeline, the child timeline, or the fallen hero timeline, they all eventually lead to this point, to this era where only ruins remain of once grand structures. The temple serves as physical proof of the timeline's convergence theory. If Breath of the Wild truly represents a future where all timelines eventually merge, then the Forgotten Temple, as the evolved form of the Temple of Time, is exactly what fans should expect to find. A structure so fundamentally important to Hyrule's history that it appears in multiple timeline branches, would naturally persist, would naturally be the last grand monument still standing, even in ruined form. Now, some fans have pointed out another fascinating connection. The interior of the Forgotten Temple resembles not just Ocarina of Time's Temple of Time, but also the Temple of Time that appears in Twilight Princess. That game, released in 2006 for the GameCube and Wii, featured its own version of the temple, this time as a ruin in the Sacred Grove. The structure in Twilight Princess showed what happens when centuries pass, when nature reclaims sacred spaces. Sound familiar? The progression is remarkable when laid out chronologically by release date. Ocarina of Time shows the Temple of Time in its prime, Twilight Princess shows it in a state of decay, overtaken by forest, Breath of the Wild shows it completely ruined, renamed, forgotten even in memory. It's a visual chronicle of entropy, of time's inexorable march, told through architecture. And Nintendo's artists deliberately maintained visual continuity across these iterations, ensuring that fans who pay attention can trace the lineage. The divine beasts, those colossal Sheikah machines that play such a crucial role in the Breath of the Wild story, also factor into understanding the Forgotten Temple's significance. The Sheikah created the divine beasts 10,000 years before the game's events, positioning them strategically around Hyrule. The fact that Guardian Stalkers remain at the Forgotten Temple suggests the Sheikah recognized locations of historical importance, even if the general population had forgotten. They were preserving, protecting, remembering, even when memory itself had faded. Let's consider player experience for a moment. When fans first discover the Forgotten Temple, it's often through exploration rather than quest direction. There's no mandatory reason to visit, no main quest leads there. It's entirely optional. And yet, players who do venture into that canyon, who do face the Guardians, who do walk that long, haunted hallway, they're rewarded with an experience that resonates on a deeper level than simple gameplay mechanics. The temple contains multiple goddess statues, where Link can trade spirit orbs for heart containers or stamina vessels, a practical gameplay benefit. But the real reward is the environmental storytelling, the sense of uncovering lost history, of standing in a place that once mattered deeply to this world. That feeling of discovery, of connection to something ancient and meaningful, that's what makes Zelda games special. That's what elevates them beyond simple adventure games into something mythic. The music, or rather the lack thereof, also contributes to the Forgotten Temple's atmosphere. Unlike many locations in Breath of the Wild that feature memorable musical themes, the temple is largely silent, with only ambient environmental sounds. This musical absence speaks volumes. It suggests a place beyond song, beyond celebration, a space where even music has been forgotten. The silence becomes its own kind of soundtrack, haunting and melancholic. Compare this to the Temple of Time's iconic theme from Ocarina of Time, one of the most recognizable melodies in gaming history. That theme represented hope, destiny, the sacred. Its absence in the Forgotten Temple drives home how much has been lost, how thoroughly time has erased even the echoes of what once was. Players familiar with that melody can almost hear it in their minds as they walk through the ruins, creating a ghostly, nostalgic resonance. The Forgotten Temple also appears in The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild's direct sequel released in 2023. In that game, the temple retains its mysterious significance, with players discovering additional secrets within. The developer's decision to bring the location back for the sequel reinforces its importance to this era of Hyrule's history. It's not just a one-off reference, it's a landmark they consider essential to understanding this version of Hyrule. What makes this location particularly brilliant from a game design perspective is how it respects player knowledge. Newcomers to Zelda can explore the Forgotten Temple and still have a meaningful experience. It's atmospheric, challenging due to the Guardians, and rewarding with its goddess statues. But veterans, players who've spent hours in Ocarina of Time's Temple of Time, who understand the significance of these architectural parallels, they receive an entirely additional layer of meaning, of emotional resonance. This dual-layer design philosophy pervades Breath of the Wild. The game works perfectly well as a standalone experience, but it also rewards longtime fans with countless references, callbacks, and connections to previous entries. The Forgotten Temple exemplifies this approach at its finest, accessible to all, but deeply meaningful to those with the knowledge to see its true significance. Consider also the symbolism of decay and renewal that the temple represents. Zelda games have always dealt with cyclical themes, the eternal struggle between good and evil, the recurring appearance of Link, Zelda, and Ganon across generations. The Forgotten Temple embodies this cycle in physical form. What was once vibrant becomes ruined, what was remembered becomes forgotten. But the structure endures, waiting for a new hero, ready to play its part in yet another cycle. The guardian stalkers patrolling the entrance take on additional meaning in this light. They're not just enemies to overcome, they're the last sentinels of a forgotten age, still carrying out protocols programmed thousands of years ago, still protecting a location whose original significance even they no longer understand. It's tragic, poignant, and utterly fitting for the melancholic atmosphere that pervades so much of Breath of the Wild's world. When Link retrieves the Master Sword from Korok Forest and then explores the Forgotten Temple, there's an almost poetic completeness to the experience. The sword was once kept in a grand temple at the heart of civilization. Now it rests in a hidden forest, while that temple lies in ruins. It's a reversal that speaks to how dramatically Hyrule has changed, how much has been lost and lost again through the ages. The developers have stated in various interviews that they wanted Breath of the Wild to feel like an ancient legend, a story told and retold until the truth blurs with myth. The Forgotten Temple perfectly captures this concept. Players can piece together what it might have been, but they can never know with absolute certainty. They must reconstruct history from fragments, from architectural echoes, from the land's memory. That ambiguity, that mystery, it's intentional and powerful. There's something universally human about standing in ruins and imagining past glory. Throughout real-world history, people have been fascinated by ancient sites, by monuments that outlasted their builders. The Parthenon, Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu, these places capture imagination because they represent both achievement and impermanence. The Forgotten Temple taps into that same fascination, that same meditation on time and legacy. For players who followed the Zelda series since its 1986 debut, the Forgotten Temple represents something even more profound. It's a reminder that these games have their own archaeology now. The series has existed long enough that its early entries feel genuinely ancient to younger players. The callback to Ocarina of Time isn't just a reference, it's a connection to gaming history, to a title that defined 3D adventure games, that influenced everything that came after. The way forward for Zelda lore could involve finally definitively confirming what the Forgotten Temple represents. Future games, future companion books, future developer interviews might shed additional light on this mystery. But there's also value in leaving some questions unanswered, in allowing players to construct their own understanding based on evidence and interpretation. That collaborative storytelling, where players become active participants in uncovering lore, it's part of what makes Zelda's narrative approach so engaging. Standing at the entrance of the Forgotten Temple, looking down that long columned hall toward the goddess statue at its far end, players experience a moment of profound connection across time. This structure has stood through calamities, through the rise and fall of civilizations, through the endless cycle of darkness and light that defines Hyrule's existence. And now, in this present moment, Link walks through it once more, continuing the eternal story of the hero's courage. The Forgotten Temple isn't forgotten at all. It lives in the landscape, it lives in the architecture, it lives in the memory of players who recognize what they're seeing. It's a bridge between two beloved games, between past and present, between memory and myth. And that makes it one of the most significant locations in the entire Zelda series, a monument not just to Hyrule's history, but to the enduring power of this legendary franchise. So the next time you boot up Breath of the Wild, make the journey to the Tanagar Canyon, face the Guardian Stalkers, walk through that massive columned hall, stand before the goddess statue, and remember, you're not just exploring a ruin. You're walking through living history, through the remnants of one of gaming's most iconic locations, through a temple that connects decades of Zelda storytelling into one unforgettable time-spanning epic. The Forgotten Temple stands as testament to Nintendo's masterful environmental storytelling, to the depth of Zelda's lore, and to the enduring magic of a franchise that continues to captivate players across generations. It's forgotten only in name. In every other way, it remains vibrantly, powerfully alive in the hearts of fans who recognize its true significance. And that legacy, that connection across time and games, that will never be forgotten.